Hello, 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 hello. Welcome back to the Rez Podcast, the show where we explore relationships, personal growth, mental health, and the experiences that shape how we see ourselves and the world around us. I'm your host, Reza, and today we're talking about something that affects nearly every part of our lives: the relationship between self-love, self-worth, and the people we choose to date. My guest today is Jonathon Aslay, one of America's leading midlife self-love and relationship coaches. Jonathon has built an audience of over 200,000 followers on YouTube, where he helps people better understand dating, emotional health, and what it truly means to love yourself. His own experiences with love, loss, and personal transformation led him to look beyond conventional dating advice and recognize that our relationships often expose something much deeper: how we genuinely feel about ourselves. He's also the author of What the Heck is Self Love Anyway, a book that offers practical and spiritual approaches to developing greater self worth, self regard, and emotional awareness. Jonathon, welcome to the Rez Podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the rewrite of my bio. Can I borrow yours?
I'm known to have the kind of the over the top intros for the guests. I love it. Well, thanks again. Thanks for making the time, Jonathon. So I want to get right into things. A lot of dating advice focuses on how to attract someone, keep their interest, or avoid making mistakes. You seem to go underneath all of that and focus on self-love. So what do you believe self-love is, that, or why do you believe self-love is that real foundation of a healthy relationship? And it's sort of, to me, is like a cliche. Like, everybody talks about self-love. So
Yeah.
talk to me about that.
Well, I want to address it in a couple angles. First, dating is very performative today. It's based on attraction, entertainment, romance, and physical connection versus what it's really designed to do. What is the purpose of dating is the question people should be asking. And that's to vet to see if this person that you don't know, spending time with a person you don't know, you build enough rapport, trust, and attraction to explore a relationship with. And then what is the purpose of a relationship? What's the definition of a relationship? And a lot of people go into it so ambivalently, so unconscious, without any intention, that no wonder it's a cluster F out there. I don't know if it's okay to curse, but
Oh, it's totally okay to curse. Yeah.
okay, so it's a clusterfuck out there to some degree. So that's just one of the many challenges that we're faced with. Why self love is so important is that every human being, adult human being, has an emotional 6-year-old inside of us. I don't care if you were raised in the most perfect of conditions, or sadly, if you were raised in a horrific condition. There's an emotional 6-year-old that's been traumatized to some degree within ourselves. And it's both in our child experiences, but also our adult experience as well. And when I say traumatized, even a breakup that of a short-lived experience could be traumatic to that emotional 6-year-old inside of us. So if we all have an emotional 6-year-old inside of us, what self-love is the nurturing and the support of that little 6-year-old inside of us through, self-awareness, through understanding our fears, our insecurities, our negative patterns, our limiting beliefs, our judgments of others, how our actions affect other people. And so through a more self-aware approach, we begin to, and a self-examine approach of that emotional 6-year-old inside of us, we begin to become better partners for another human being. Because sadly, we have a population of walking wounded running around, both those that are single and looking for love, and certainly those that are in relationship, and they're bouncing off one another because they don't have the tools to both love themselves and actually be of service to another human being.
Interesting. Jonathon, when you say 6-year-old, is that like an actual number, like 6-year-old, or like,
I should preface this. I'm calling it an emotional 6-year-old.
okay,
Um,
okay.
I think as human beings, we are just still scratching the surface
Okay.
of emotional maturity and relationship skills. And here's the fallacy most people live in. Everybody thinks they're an emotional adult. It's the delusion that the ego feeds us. But I believe, and I chose 6-year-old because that seems enough to know where you know a little bit, but you clearly don't know much at all. Um, and the way a 6-year-old reacts to trauma, the way a 6-year-old reacts to fear, the way a 6-year-old reacts to things is a lot different, and that's why I chose that number. But that's my made-up number. But I would say therapists all say between the ages 2 and 12 is the formation of our emotional identity.
Okay, okay. And I just want to ask you a question because I often have heard in self-help advice that when we are children, and you use 6-year-old, we're not socially conditioned yet. And so tend to be happy as a 6-year-old.
Hmm.
Is part of what you do kind of related to social conditioning and what happens, or is that off topic?
Well, no, no. So, when you think of a 6-year-old, actually, I think we are born of love. I mean, when we come out of the womb, there's a divinity within us. And certainly there's joy and happiness, but there's also, the minute you poop, you start crying and stuff like that. But I want you to imagine at roughly at age 3 to 6, give or take, you've heard the word no how many hundreds, if not thousands of times. And to, like your parents say, no, don't touch the stove, or no, don't
Hmm.
touch this.
Hmm.
And to an emotional, to a 6-year-old, that no can feel violent. Just the
Okay.
word no, let alone all the other things that happen in childhood. you know I'm a baby boomer, so I was raised with, my dad slapped me, my dad hit me, my mom slapped me, my mom hit me. That was very common for that. Certainly that shifted now, but just think. And by the way, I would tell you that I was raised in a good middle class home. I got my dad beat the shit out of me once. I remember it, vividly, and that's just to name a few things. So coming back to the social conditioning, to some degree, we've been socialized from the moment we're born. Babies, boys have blue nurseries, girls have pink nurseries. The way we're raised, there's always a social conditioning. There's cultural conditioning going on. There's economic conditioning going on. So we're all raised with some sort of conditioning that makes up our identity, who we really are. And I would venture to say most adults are struggling with their identity. They're struggling with the emotional, regulation. And I would say that the number one emotional health wound that every adult is experiencing, and this is the world according to Jonathon, this is not a statement of fact, this is my opinion, but the number one emotional health wound is I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, and I'm not likable. And sometimes the most confident of people have the weakest little 6-year-old inside of them.
Mhm. Okay, okay, okay. Brilliant. Uh, Jonathan, I kind of wanted to ask you, one of the ideas I talk about on my podcast is separating our self worth from the external character we're playing in life. But
Yeah,
in dating, people often measure their worth by attention, matches, messages, or whether someone chooses them. How
sure.
can someone stop using romantic attention as proof of their value?
Well, I think it requires the ability to live a self examined life. And where I talked about earlier, that self awareness around our fears, our insecurities, our negative patterns, our limiting beliefs, our judgments for others, our recognition how our actions affect others. So, within that scope of what I just laid out as self awareness, is to separate yourself from the ego that might need that attention or like or validation or text message to validate them, to recognize that our soul is a self-contained being. We can nurture, all of our needs can be met within oneself. Okay, it requires taking a step back, but sadly most humans don't have that capacity because they haven't done personal development work, self-help work, spiritual work, or even therapy to examine our thoughts and our actions and our emotions. And quite frankly, for those that choose that journey, it's a very juicy, delicious roller coaster ride filled with a lot of ups and downs. But when we recognize, or when a person recognizes that we are not of that, it's just a part of what we experience, we can actually start looking at it with a lot more joy and reverence.
Interesting. And you've said, Jonathan, that relationships can be one of the best paths towards self love.
Yeah.
How does being close to another person expose the insecurities, attachment patterns, or emotional wounds that we might not recognize when we're alone?
Yeah, so when we are alone, there's very little that triggers us. A lot of people, years ago there was the MGTOW, men going their own way, and now women are decentering from men, and people are saying, I'm happy being single. And that's great when you're single. When you can go to bed when you want, you can wake up when you want, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, whenever you want. You have all this freedom and
Yeah.
autonomy, and it's great. But to the extent to grow, we grow when we're triggered.
Hmm.
To some degree we can grow by doing spiritual retreats and things like that, but nothing creates faster emotional growth than being triggered. And
I
trust
love
me,
that.
you could
I
have the
love that.
most loving of partners and they're going to trigger the fuck out of you.
Yep. No, I love that. Oh my God. Yeah. So when you say triggered, you're talking about when you're by yourself. I'm still trying to understand that because I feel like if I'm by myself, I'm triggered in the sense that I feel lonely. Isn't that a trigger?
So that's a great question. So, and I to the extent this is relatively, I want to say not a new phenomena, but there's this culture of loneliness that's happening more so since COVID. So that's really worth an examination. And the question is, loneliness will trigger or activate oneself. Okay. Now, what a lot of people is they're putting a protective cloak around themselves. They're going, "I'm so happy being single. I'm living my best life being single." But if there's a part of you that deeply wants to be in a loving partnership with another, then what you're doing is bypassing the pain in that cloak of I'm happy being single. But and again, that's if you're having that desire to be in a life partnership. If you're alone and you're happy being alone, then you're not triggered. You're
Mm.
only triggered because you think you're missing something.
Okay. So self awareness again
Yeah.
is key. Okay. Um, Jonathan, the dating world is filled with coaches teaching strategies, confidence, attraction, and social skills. Some of the advice can be useful, but where is the line between genuinely improving yourself and simply performing a more attractive version of yourself to receive validation?
Yeah, ever since COVID and the boom of TikTok and Reels and Shorts, we have a proliferation of people giving dating advice. And a lot of it is rage bait driven. In other words, it's designed to create aggravation, agitation, and it creates a lot of separation between men and women. I would venture to say that the largest percentage of relationship advice out there through social media particularly, okay, just hear me out, is that it's designed to pit men against women. In fact, so much so that, remember I told you MGTOW, the men going their own way, it's because there's almost, I'm not suggesting this, but there's almost a hatred towards women, and the decentering of men is the same thing. You've got the manosphere out there that's telling all these young boys and young men what's wrong, and it's feminist movement and such like that. So there's a lot of toxic
Yep,
noise out there. So,
100%.
so, and I would even say, as I look back to the advice I've given over the last decade, I've been a party to that. So I want to raise my hand and take some ownership of that. I think the challenge with dating advice is I think a person who's really done the work on themselves internally, and they've done work like particularly in the area of communication skills. So I was in group workshops for years, not as the host, as a participant. helped me tremendously with my communication skills, interpersonal skills with other human beings. So the individual that does that, and the individual that, you could hire a coach and say, hey, help me make my dating profile a little bit better, help me understand things. That's all valuable and such. But to the individual that's done a fair amount of work, the question is, how am I going to meet my potential partner? How am I going to be seen by another individual? Because that's the greatest challenge. How am I going to be seen to either ask someone out or to be asked out? And the way we live today makes it incredibly difficult. I live in by the way, I'm in a loving relationship. I have a life partner. We live together, okay? But I live in a beautiful city with thousands of people.
Where do you live, Jonathan?
I live in Redondo Beach, California, which is
Nice,
just
nice. Very
15
beautiful.
minutes, well, actually in Torrance, but my office is in
Okay.
Redondo Beach. That's
Yeah,
where
yeah.
I'm at right now.
Okay, okay.
And 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 I barely know 10 people within a 1 mile radius of me. I have friends all over the area, I have lots of people I know, but I barely know 10 people. Probably that's, a little bit more than 10.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, we no longer live in environments where we're interacting with other people on a regular basis. So coaches will tell you, well, go do the things you love. Join a cycling group, join a pickleball group, join this or that to meet people. Yeah, just like a broken clock, it's right twice a day. You will get lucky.
Yeah.
But now, nothing beats meeting people faster than through the internet, through whether it's dating apps or social media. The problem is we have a lot of walking wounded going on out there, in the marketplace. So the trick is then to decipher who's emotionally grown up to be in a relationship, who's capable of a relationship, who shares my values, my lifestyle, and emotional maturity. And that's where it gets tricky because, quite frankly, to be a good dater, remember I said dating was to vet for relationship. To be a good dater, you have to be a detective.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way of getting around it, And what is a detective? Their sole job is just to get to the truth. That's their job. Their job is to get to the truth. That's what being a detective is. So
Are you talking
whether
like
we
red
like it or
flags?
not, we have to be a detective.
So what, detecting red flags and stuff like that, or?
No, it's to detect truth, to detect
Authenticity.
to detect truth, to detect
Okay.
vulnerability, authenticity, transparency. And this is a skill that we are so terrible at. We human beings are very poor at that. Now, so there's a person listening that's going, well, I'm good at this. Trust me. I'm still scratching the ant's belly and I do this for a living. Okay.
Interesting. Jonathan, I wanted to kind of, because you mentioned the what was the term you used? The movement term?
MGTOW or
MGTOW. Yeah, MGTOW.
men going their own way.
What is red pill, blue pill, all that stuff? Are you familiar with those terms?
To the extent that I have a base understanding of the manosphere, that's the Andrew Tates of the world and such.
I hate Andrew Tate personally.
Yeah, I
I
equally
really
do.
Okay. I'm glad we
So
have that in
if
common.
to those
Yeah.
listening, many people understand it. It's, in my opinion, this is purely my opinion, it's a group of men who have this belief that feminism killed relationships, that it's the feminist movement and women's empowerment that's made it difficult for you, person who's, young man who's 21 years old looking for just a connection with another human being. And this group of individuals have fed, to some degree, there's truth in what they say. It is based in some level of truth, whether we talk about hypergamy or that a significant percentage of young women are only going after a small percentage of the highest, what they perceive to be the highest caliber of man. That's what that conversation, the red pill is, and the blue pill is simply comes from the movie The Matrix, and it's, do you want the truth or do you want the lie? And that's where that comes from.
I see. Now, that group of men in my opinion, have given up on dating, right? Essentially.
Well, I would say a significant percentage of those men have a disdain for women in general outside of
Exactly.
what those women can do for them. In other words, they look at women still from an objectified object point of view. I would say a significant amount because they're not coming at it from a real sense of love, of empowerment, of cooperation, of reciprocity, of teamwork. They're not, by the way, none of their conversation talks about the purpose of a relationship and how to build a successful relationship. It's all designed to make young men angry around
Exactly.
women.
It's such bullshit. I
And
hate it. I hate that
yeah,
Andrew Tate stuff.
yeah,
All right. Well, Jonathan, I um I wanted to ask you something about like so I'm in a relationship as well. You mentioned
yay.
you are. I'm in a happily relationship. We love each other. Everything is great. What does a healthy self-love look like without becoming selfish or emotionally distant? So how do you remain committed to another person without losing your identity or making them responsible for your happiness? I guess what I'm
Yeah,
getting at is codependence because sometimes a question, right? Like I told you I'm happy,
yeah.
but at the same time, it make like if she doesn't text me back, oh, I get so anxious. Like it's weird.
Okay, so you have okay, and by the way, I'm the exact same way. I was raised or was indoctrinated, I would say, into an anxious attachment. For those that
Oh,
are familiar with the book "Attached" by Amin,
yes. I
Amin,
forgot it. Yeah.
God,
I
how
forgot.
can I not know his name? Amin
Attachment styles.
Levine and Rachel Heller. Excuse me, Amir
Yes.
Levine and
Okay.
Rachel Heller.
Hmm.
There's basically there's anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, secure attachment, and within the anxious and avoidant, there's subcategories within that. So I get that you're anxious, okay? So
Yeah, a little bit
so
for sure.
here's the thing: you're aware that you're anxious. So
Mm,
let's
mm.
use you. And by the way, I'm exactly the same way. So you're aware of this. You know this, okay? So when that text message doesn't come and you start to feel anxious, you can take a step outside of yourself. Okay? Remember that emotional 6-year-old. The taking care of the emotional 6-year-old is pulling away from the emotional 6-year-old that's feeling anxious and stepping out and saying, "Wait a minute, what's really going on? What's
Mm.
going on? I'm triggered. Okay, I'm triggered because I haven't gotten a text. Let me think about this. Every single time I've had this experience, she's always come back to me loving, or there's always been
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So you, and then
Exactly.
when, by the way, when she
That's the
reached,
funny thing. It's
yeah,
like it's all there's never been a problem, but as
okay,
soon as it takes a long time, I get stressed. Yeah.
but you can pull yourself out of that and regulate yourself through self-awareness. You know it, right? So you were laughing about it a moment ago. So that's the best place to be is I'm aware, and boy, isn't it amazing that I still keep doing this after all this time, okay?
I know.
So, like anything, you have to practice self-soothing in that moment. You have to practice, you have to practice self-awareness. You have to practice, remembering that this is just something made up in my head. Because guess what? That's just a story in your head. A story, okay? When you watch a movie that you see something, do you go, "Oh, that's real," or is it just a story you just saw? So if you're watching something and you think that's real, well, that's what's happening. But you have the ability to go and go, "Wait a minute, that movie I'm watching isn't real. I mean, it's a great story, but it's not real." And that requires practice. And that's the thing. It takes repetition upon repetition upon repetition. Whether you like it or not, we humans haven't learned how to snap our fingers and be emotionally regulated. It takes practice. Some are
Interesting.
better at it than others, though.
Right. So is anybody fully secure? Like, cause like this attachment theory stuff, like, is there anybody that's fully secure, Jonathan?
You know, I believe we all have a default. Whether we like it or not, we have an anxious or avoidant default to some degree. I would think that, that couples can reach a very secure place. Are they 100% secure? I mean, to some degree, keep in mind, now we're getting into Buddhist philosophy around attachment and where suffering comes from attachment, right? So, so I would say that I don't think we ever reach 100%, but it's something to strive for. But I think there are couples there. Okay, I'm going to say something that's probably going to irritate some people. I think genuinely loving, happy couples are the exception, not the rule. I mean, two people fully committed to each other, to be in service to each other, that have great sex together, that love each other's company and they're true friends. I think that's the exception, not the rule. I think most people are experiencing some sort of dependent, dysfunctional. Now, let me just put it in grades, though. It might be 10 or 20% dysfunctional. It might be 50. It might be 80 or 100%. Okay. So, I mean, there are certainly couples out there that might have a little bit of dysfunction.
Yeah. Got it.
But I think we are still in the infancy stage of human development, particularly in the area of relationship and good communication skills, good relationship skills, all of these good self-love skills. We're still at the infancy, and we are going to be at this for a long time before we get really good at it.
Amazing. Jonathan, it's been a pleasure to have you on. So much great insights. I'm going to listen to this again on my drive.
I'm going to listen to it. I appreciate you you're a great interviewer, Rez.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And it's amazing that you were on here because I know you're so busy. Where can people find you?
Okay, my name is listed right here. You cut and paste it. You put it in Google. First thing that will come up is my YouTube channel. Next thing that will come up is my website. Third thing would most likely be my book on Amazon or Instagram or social media. If you found what I had to share was even remotely helped you in a little bit, go check out any of those platforms.
Amazing. Jonathan, I'm going to hit stop on the recording.